Hello again, everybody. This is John with BestPriceNutrition.com. Today we have Bruce from Garden of Life with us. We like having Bruce here because Bruce is very knowledgeable. You know, we've done other videos with him about paleo. And Bruce isn't just somebody who's just going to push supplements. He's got a lot of knowledge and stuff. So, yes, we are going to talk about the Garden of Life products. But I think, Bruce, you can do a good job of explaining. We talked about why you liked working for Garden of Life, as far as the way that vitamins and stuff are made, by your company, and then we can discuss the CoQ10.
I guess I'm pretty passionate about the understanding of how these nutrients exist. You know, that when we look at a food, first off, you never find any of the nutrients in a food. When you eat a lemon or an apple or nuts or seeds, you don't get the nutrients there as a crystalline form. And then number two, they're never isolated. They're always part of a complex. You know, whatever nutrient you get. I always point out that vitamin B1, thiamine, is never one molecule bound to hydrochloric acid, the way you find it in thiamine hydrochloride in a vitamin pill. So I guess a big part of what I love about this company, about Garden of Life, is that we pay attention to kind of the original message of the original biochemists who discovered most of these vitamins, who commented on this type of stuff, saying that really there were a lot of cofactors that were equally responsible for those effects in the body. And this kind of gets into that concept of potency. And it's something that drives me crazy out there in the field. I'm sure you guys deal with it, where people walk in and say, well, potency is just weight. They think of, how many milligrams, and that's their whole idea of potency. But sometimes it's the isolated fraction, even though it's a whole pile of that powder, doesn't really perform the same way as the food, even when that food is actually pretty low in that vitamin, so to speak. So it's more about potency is more about the functional effect. And that's why I love our line. I think we really provide something that is really cofactor rich and looks a lot more like food. All those cofactors.
Okay. Well, today we're talking about raw CoQ10. Now, a lot of people may or may not understand, CoQ10 being a Krebs cycle intermediate, what effects it's going to have in the body, and specifically not only individuals who are, otherwise unhealthy, who need to improve health, but also healthy individuals.
Right.
What will CoQ10 in general do? Or, if we were to look into a book, what is the benefits of CoQ10?
Well, they would say cell energy, which basically the big issue with CoQ10 is it strengthens the heart. It's also very protective of the brain. It's one of the most fundamental antioxidants in our cells. And so CoQ10 is really, really good at strengthening weak hearts and also protecting from damage to the brain from oxidative stress. So in general, people who are huffing and puffing after even a tiny bit of exercise, this is mostly older people who they study it in. Or people who are overtraining their body. Intense athletes will often notice a bump. They might, have better training, maybe get through more reps before they hit fatigue. So there's a lot of benefits for muscles, and of course the heart, a muscle. The other area is blood pressure. There's been a lot of research on blood pressure and a lot of research on migraines. That's the other big area, headaches and migraines.
Yeah, I think we're starting to see more research in athletes and healthy individuals where some of these things like CoQ10 or other antioxidants, NARALA, where they can be beneficial for athletes because there is stress being put on the body, just by nature with exercise. And you touched on something brief with CoQ10 is sometimes we think when we talk about cellular energy in the form of ATP, people often equate energy to like carbohydrates and fats and macromolecules, but at some point your body has to turn those into ATP for a muscle to contract, for a cell to be able to function. Mitochondria require it. So,
exactly.
Now, what is unique about the CoQ10 that Garden of Life uses?
Well, as I was just saying before, we actually take all of our vitamins and our minerals and our coenzyme Q10, we shuttle them into living cells and grow them in bacteria. And the whole idea with that is that you get, at the end, we chop that cell wall open and you get a bacterial cell wall with a bunch of cofactors, specifically amino acids, trace minerals, enzymes, carotenoids, a lot of other stuff that's really part of that matrix. It's not just one molecule sitting next to each other over and over and over again the way you'd find it in most pills. That's not the way food exists. And so we kind of try to utilize that wisdom of what nature has always provided and go with something that looks more complex, restoring that complexity of the whole.
So at this point in time, we can say these whole food, fermented forms of vitamins, and CoQ10 in this case, is at least as good as the isolated form.
Right.
But very well may be better, and some of the research is going to discover a lot of these cofactors that go with it, hopefully, and demonstrate that, hey, this is more effective, because as you said, a lot of the research in the past where we kind of found that was when it was found in foods and things like that, and you want to more closely mimic the way you'd find it in a food. Is that
right? Yeah, I mean, you're right. We're going to set up controlled experiments to try to show that ours is better absorbed, better utilized, and actually drives the ATP up even more. But on the other hand, we don't have that data yet. but we're still using a very effective dose. So like you said, we're not counting on a superior uptake or a superior absorption or utilization. We're going with something that we think probably will provide better utilization and better uptake, but we're still going to use a very effective dose, 200 milligram a day.
So yes, and if you compare price-wise, it's on par, the 2-month supply with, and in some cases cheaper than a lot of the isolated versions.
It's really one of the cheapest, milligram per dollar CoQ10s out there. What I also like to say about ours, it's a little different. We package it into chia seed oil. We didn't use a soybean oil or rice bran oil. We thought, why not give you a little extra omega-3? We really felt like, having a chlorophyll coating is also another example of where we felt like we're a little better than most. Chlorophyll is protecting it from oxidation. We don't want to crystallize the molecules in there from light hitting the molecules inside the capsule. So we use a chlorophyll coat, giving you a little extra chlorophyll, the lifeblood of plants. But then we also use a chia seed oil delivery. So another might as well. We thought, why not give you a little extra omega-3 in the formula?
Because that CoQ10 is fat soluble, so you suspending it in oil makes the absorption not a concern.
Yes, and that's a key. I mean, I would, for anybody buying CoQ10, please do your reading, and I would say the literature has really favored the oil suspended forms, meaning that the CoQ10 should be in an oil to be absorbed. The dry forms, if you're going to take a dry form, you better do yourself a favor and take it with a high-fat meal. It's the only way you'll even have a chance of absorbing it.
And then with regard to form, we see ubiquinone versus ubiquinol, and I like to equate it to creatine monohydrate versus all the new, novel forms of creatine, where all the research has been done on creatine monohydrate. It's cheaper. We know that it works. Well, with CoQ10, ubiquinone is the one that has, hundreds of studies that have demonstrated its effectiveness. Now, ubiquinol, the reduced form, has come along. Right. And within the Krebs cycle, it's constantly changing. Right. You want to touch on that briefly?
Yeah, I mean, to me, this whole debate is sort of one of these areas where the marketing is way ahead of the science. Almost all the research, over 3,000 studies, are on the form that we're using, ubiquinone. Now this new one comes out a few years ago, and I hear all these bold marketing statements as if you're not going to see any benefit from the old ubiquinone, even though that's where all the benefits have been demonstrated. And they're saying, well, this new one that we have very little research on, this is the one that's the new highness. And to me, I guess when I look at all that data, it's pretty inconsistent. And I think really we went with the one that has all the research, the one that has been prescribed for 25 years, the one that is really far less expensive, and also, at the end of the day, will become ubiquinol anyway. It really should not matter if you understand the physiology here. When you swallow this, it just becomes ubiquinol. When you swallow ubiquinol, it just becomes this. They cycle back and forth and back and forth. I always use the analogy of like a bus picking up passengers and then dropping them off, and then picking them up and then dropping them off. Basically, CoQ10 is like a little bus picking up electrons and shuttling them around inside the mitochondria and dropping them off. So it's constantly changing between ubiquinone and ubiquinol. I don't think it matters whether you get a full bus or an empty bus into the driving route, because the whole point is moving how many people on that route, not whether you get the one payload on that first entrance. So yeah, for me, CoQ10, ubiquinone's the way to go. That's why we went this route. Better value with all the data.
And last thing, I believe there's a probiotic blend in there as well?
That's right, yeah. We tend to put probiotics in everything. We're a digestive health company, so we use a strain that is a yeast. Throws some people off, but this is not something that people with yeast problems are going to have to avoid. In fact, if they have yeast problems, the strain we're using, Saccharomyces boulardii, is actually very good for yeast infections. It's actually been shown that in Japan, they call it the yeast against yeast. It outcompetes other bad, harmful yeasts like candidiasis and other really bad ones. So yeah, a really good probiotic for your colon.
Okay, well that's good to know. Well, I think we covered everything as far as CoQ10. I think in the future, Glenn and I, if you guys are looking, we're probably going to talk about CoQ10 as far as benefits for athletes, because we're going to do some research on that and touch on that a little bit more specifically. We just wanted to touch on the specific formula that Garden of Life is working with, and the oil suspension, I think, is very important, as you talked about, as far as absorption.
One of the things I often say is that, Garden of Life, we went to school on this. We were pretty late to the party. Coenzyme Q10's been going real strong for decades. And we wanted to be the last out, best dressed. Something a little better price point, a little cleaner raw material, no chemical emulsifiers, a nice probiotic, suspended into chia seed oil, all for a really good price. We kind of wanted to go to school on the marketplace and offer the best value we could ever do.
Cool. All right, well, I think we covered it well. If you guys have any questions, feel free to post them in the comments section. We're happy to answer them. Thank you, Bruce.